ESPN 1059 The Zone. Steve Robertson joins us. Gene's Page 247 Sports. Show is brought to you by Cover Source Solutions. HVAC and plumbing. So if you need air conditioning work, and that's important year-round, but definitely this time of year, Cover Source Solutions. And then plumbing. Cover Source Solutions. HVAC and plumbing, locally owned, Mississippi grown, with locations in Brandon and Ridgeland. Is Steve fighting with his phone? Steve Robertson on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Steve, are you in Starkville traffic?
No, I'm in Starkville proper. I'm good. I don't have any traffic problems out here in the stick.
All right, all right, Joe Castiglione, longtime athletic director at Oklahoma, is stepping down after 27 years. And Zach Selmon is tied to Oklahoma, worked there. We know about his dad and his uncle, legendary players under Barry Switzer. And that's his dream job. And this is okay to say, if he's offered, he's gone. Do you believe that he is the leader in the clubhouse right now?
Well, I think that may be a little bit premature, but he is probably the most obvious candidate in the country, because of his connections there, his ties there. He's worked there. You know, he grew up in an Oklahoma family. I mean, that name, let's be honest about that. I mean, the Selma name is probably only second to Switzer when it comes to Oklahoma football. I mean, so, yeah, I mean, there's some obvious connections there. I think one of the questions you got to ask yourself a little bit is, has he done enough here? That's going to be up for Oklahoma to determine. But, with Castiglione staying on till 2028, kind of as the athletic director emeritus, you got to think there's probably some candidates out there that they're going to look at and say, okay, well, this is an arrangement that makes sense because we'll have Joe to kind of help mentor some things along. And so I think that may turn some people off, but it could also turn some people on, because of the fact that maybe you've got a pre-existing relationship with Joe. So I think it's still really early, but I think there is a reasonable sense of concern if you're Mississippi State.
Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds Show, 247 Sports, Gene's Page. They're covering everything. Brian O'Connor, Jeff Lebby, Chris Jans, Josh Hubbard, Blake Shapen, Zach Selmon. Have you heard anything on the timeline? When this could, what do you think? Mid-fall? How do you see this shaking out?
Well, you see the press conference yesterday, and I went and read some of that. I hadn't watched Joe's comments in their entirety, but that they said from basically once Pete Thamel's report broke that local TV station said that he planned to step away from a full-time role this year and like this calendar year. And so I don't think it's a situation that drags on for very long. And I think they probably have a short list of candidates probably already in mind before you make an announcement like this. And so I don't think it's something that drags on, but I don't think it's something that happens this week.
Okay. But you do believe he'll be one of the top 3 candidates for the job?
Yeah, I think he should be. I mean, just because of his family connections, and you look, the last 6 months have been pretty good for Zach Selmon in Mississippi State. I mean, you announced the plans to have the football-only IPF. You have the greatest year of fundraising in the fiscal year in the history of the school. And then you went out and get Brian O'Connor and made one of the biggest hires in the history of college baseball. I mean, so, it's been a good stretch, for Zach Selmon. And I think those are some things you can point to. And, on the other side of things, and if you're Oklahoma, you look at this and say, okay, well, hey, we are a football school primarily.
Sure.
Zach comes from a football family, but Mississippi State hadn't done a whole lot in football during his tenure year. So there may be some concern there, but you got to think, with the Selmon name, and then obviously, with some connections in that respect, that's probably something you could sell, I would suspect.
Yeah. So the good is the Brian O'Connor hire and fundraising. And the bad is last year on the football field, his hire was an absolute disaster. So basically you're saying, You got two things that are good in fundraising in the Brian O'Connor hire, and then you got this Jeff Levy thing that is on a slippery slope. Is that fair?
Well, yeah, but also too, I think the commitment to facilities at a time that a lot of people aren't doing it. Finding a way to get those things done, finding a way to get those LED lights that have been so coveted by so many for so long, to get that process going, and then the Howard Performance Center. And those are things that again I think are feathers in the cap of one Zach Selmon. I think Zach's done a good job here as of late. I mean, you take that first year and you observe, right? I mean, you don't come in like a bull in a china shop. I mean, you got to kind of see what the lay of the land is. And I think that's what he did that first year is just, hey, let me get my legs under me and see what kind of hand I've been dealt. Then you start implementing changes and you start making facility upgrades and things of that nature. And so, I think it's been a really good 6 months for Zach Selmon. And for Mississippi State. And I know there's a lot of people out there that just say, hey, because of this, I feel like we're headed in the right direction. Maybe we have some stability. You got Jans Purcell agreed to an extension. You've got, Brian O'Connor here is the second highest paid baseball coach in America. So you feel like maybe you're entering a phase where maybe things won't be so herky-jerky, and then all of a sudden this pops up.
Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds Show, brought to you by the amazing food at Two Brothers in Starkville, Mississippi, right in the Cotton District, and their new sister restaurant, Older Brother Bistro, with the phenomenal Reuben and Muffaletta, all right there in the Cotton District. Two Brothers and Older Brother Bistro. Steve Robertson on the Farm Bureau Insurance Guest Line. Check out his page today, genespage.com. All right, win total 3.5, Steve, for Mississippi State, 2025. They're going to have to go over that for Jeff Levy to keep his job, in my opinion. If Steve Robertson was going to bet $100, which, by the way, I still owe you dinner on the Coleman Hutzler thing. Damn. If you were going to bet $100, win total is 3.5. You going over or under, Steve?
I'm going over, and I do plan to collect on that that dinner.
You should.
There's so many people that owe me money and owe me food. Sometimes it's difficult to keep up with. But nevertheless, yeah, I'm taking the over, but maybe not much over, right? I mean, obviously, four pays me, but I think this team will be better. I don't know. It's like one of those scenarios is you may have a much better team but not have a much better record because of that schedule, and so. Yeah, I was looking at it yesterday. I mean, the way that game against Florida kind of lays on the schedule, and it's so tough to go win in Gainesville, it is, no matter what kind of year they're having. But I kind of like the way where that game falls in the Florida schedule. I mean, it's after a brutal stretch there. But this team is going to have to win at least one SEC road game to get to a bowl, whether that's at Florida, whether that's at Arkansas. They're going to have to find a way to get it done. And so, Arkansas, some people project them not even to make a bowl game this year. Maybe that's one you can get. But, I think you got to get 5 or 6 wins this year.
Yeah, and you can't Chad Morris this at Arkansas. He went goose egg, and was let go. So I agree with you. Tennessee at home could be winnable. Maybe you have a 30%, 40% chance to win. Some people would say I'm crazy there. That Florida thing's interesting. I had not thought about that, but now I see that they play Texas and at A&M back-to-back before drawing Mississippi State, and they won't be interested. Florida much better, but maybe they could pull one there. And then Steve, at Arkansas, I mean, you either have to win or be really competitive in that game, right?
Yeah, and State has been. I don't know what Chad Morris ever did to Joe Moorhead, but Joe beat him just unmercifully when they played both times. But you go back and look at the Leach years. Every one of those games is very competitive. I think you could make the argument that State should have won them all. So State's had some success in Fayetteville, and of course the Arnett year, we go up there, which was one of the most boring games I've ever seen in my life.
My God.
Neither team could really mount the offense. State played really good defensively, and then State played very poor offensively. I'm not going to give the Arkansas credit defense for that. It was absolutely abysmal. The game that was called, you had Mike Wright starting the game, and it really came down to 2 plays, a false start that negated a defensive scoop and score for Arkansas, and then a phantom block in the back penalty that negated a touchdown for Mississippi State on a Mike Wright run. But, no matter what lately against Sam Pittman, State has found a way to go up there and be competitive. Now, Arkansas came into Starkville last year and made State look like they were an FCS team.
Yeah, they did.
It was absolutely abysmal. And so if I'm Jeff Levy, I don't even have to have a pregame speech when you go to Fayetteville. You know, I mean, just let that highlight video play all week long in the Sill Center, and that's your pregame speech, because that was embarrassing. That was one of the more embarrassing performances that I've seen a Mississippi State team have in a long time.
Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds Show. Check out his page, genespage.com. Brought to you by the best wings in the SEC at Two Brothers in Starkville, Mississippi. And big-time awards from USA Today, back-to-back years. Mississippi's college town is growing. All right, Steve, you mentioned – so how do you handicap this? Because I can't do it. I mean, I don't remember what it was, 33 transfers, another 20-plus signees, almost 60 new players, bringing back a few players, you know, Shapin and a couple of guys on the offensive line, and, you know, Isaac in the somehow is stuck around, God bless his soul, in the secondary there. I don't know. I mean, these guys are from Northern Illinois and Texas, and how do you handicap this team as far as how talented or not talented they are, Steve?
Well, I need to see this new look offensive line in camp. You know, I mean, that's the thing. When in the spring, the first day of camp, I go out there and I look at the offense, trying to take some pictures. You look at the offensive linemen, and most of them were shorter than me. You know, and I thought to myself, if we have to trot this group out there in a season this important to the Jeff Levy era, we're going to be in trouble. Well, you know, Phil Lodeholt changes that. And so you go out and you get some big, beefy, long guys, but we haven't seen them in the uniform yet, you know. And so I think that's going to be one of the most important things when you think about this Mississippi State team is, you know, last year the offensive line was serviceable, but you had some games you couldn't move the pile. I think Phil Lodeholt is a guy that kind of recruits in his own image, and I think that's going to be better. But, you know, I wish these guys had the benefit of the spring. Defensive line could not be any worse than last year, and that's not throwing shade at anybody. I mean, you had some injuries and you had some guys not develop. You made a major commitment to that in the offseason, so we do expect that defensive front to certainly be better. They certainly look better, and we did have the benefit of those guys in spring practice. We had a chance to see them. The group looks dramatically different compared to last year. And you go back and think about that Arkansas game last year, and we couldn't stop anybody.
Oh, my God. Sam Pittman laughed in the post-game press conference. I mean, my God.
And can you blame them?
No.
I mean, honest to God, you know, they started a freshman running back that just kind of ran all over us. And the truth of the matter is there were times last year, it was almost cruel and unusual punishment, where you had a true freshman starting in the SEC at defensive tackle, and the guy next to him is a junior college guy that didn't have anywhere to go. You know, and so, and again, and no, hey, listen, no shot at that kid, right? You get the opportunity, you take it and go try to make the most of it, but you're not going to win games in the Southeastern Conference with that kind of lineup. And so they've addressed that, and I do like the look and the movement of this defensive line group, and I think the linebackers are going to be as good or better than last year too. So, and you know what you got in the secondary? I think the secondary is probably, because the defense was so bad, I think some people are kind of sleeping on that group. But I think the secondary will be good. But I think the most dramatic improvement you're going to see on this team is on the defensive front.
Okay, well, let's talk about what kind of players we think may or may not be on the D-line. Let's think of like solid plus SEC defensive linemen at State, like a Jaden Crumity. Does anybody else come to mind, Steve? I want to kind of set the bar and go over or under. Do you have some?
Well, maybe like a Cameron Young.
Okay, all right, there we go. Do you believe that they have 4 or 5 Cam Young level defensive linemen?
I think it's really close to that. And you know, Cam was a guy too. People forget. I remember Bob Shoop telling me, you know, when he first saw him, he said, you know, that kid is the Mississippi State defensive line success story. He said that's a guy that's going to be in the NFL one day. Small town kid, you know, kind of blue collar kid that's country strong, and he said that's what Mississippi State's built a reputation on, with the defensive front, and then it turned into that. But when you think about, you know, Will Whitson, you know, Jamil Burrows. I mean, Jamil Burrows is a guy that was working overnight in the warehouse. his uncle's warehouse because he had taken some time away from football. Former Alabama guy, former Miami Hurricane, probably one of the best defensive linemen we had in camp this spring. And that's a guy that State essentially got as a walk-on, and so nobody's really talking about that, but I think there is going to be a dramatic difference on that interior. And, State was one of the worst teams in the country rushing the passer last year. And so you go out and you get Rayshon Thomas, you go get Nevaeh Sanders, and maybe this Malik Sealer kid can be something. I mean, he's rangy.
All right, those three guys right there, edge rushers. Do you think that they are SEC players or possibly SEC players? Are they fringe? Are they? I mean, nobody's asking for Montez Sweat, although that they should be, but they're not. I'm trying to think of an edge rusher that was just a nice player at State in the last 10 to 12 years.
Well, you had Sean Ferguson was the guy that did some things, and Deontay Anderson's the guy that needs to take a step up from Mississippi State this year.
God, is he still there?
Yeah. But I mean, and let's be honest about this, and no disrespect intended to anybody else, but having a fringe SEC player is quite the step up from what you had last year. And you had some guys that had been there a while but never really took the step, and you had some guys last year that just hadn't developed, and a lot of those guys are in the portal now, and are with some other team, and so the commitment from a financial and a scholarship allocation standpoint to the defensive line, I think will reap some dividends. And my thing is, you just need to be. You don't need to be great or elite on defense. If you can just be good, I think you can get to a position where maybe you win 5 or 6 games. But I mean, how many times? I wrote this article here a couple of weeks ago. This offense needs more snaps. Now, part of that is them converting at a higher clip in third downs. But how many times last year down the stretch were you in a game and needed to get a stop and couldn't get one, and then you give up the decisive score late? I mean, Texas A&M kind of comes to mind. State's very much in that game. It's a one-score game in the fourth quarter, but you couldn't get off the field.
All right. Steve Robertson, Boneyard Podcast, genespage.com. He joins us on the Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. I think I say this, they can't be any worse on defense. So, because that was the worst defense, worst team, period, but worst defense of my lifetime. And that's saying something because, Cheryl at the end, yikes. And I think, I'm sure Rocky had one or two. And anyway, you're listening to the Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN, brought to you by Tito's Drinks and Wings and Street Tacos at Two Brothers in Starville. Let's go. Keon Coleman's most talented wide receiver you probably had since Eric Moulds. He's gone to Missouri. Who is there to fill that void on offense?
Yeah, but this time last year we didn't know a lot about Kevin Coleman either.
Kevin, my bad.
Yeah, that's right.
That's how much I want to forget about the 2024 football season. I just referred to him as I think somebody who played at Florida State. But go ahead.
It happens, but I like the group, and I think Brennan Thompson is a guy that maybe he's not as thick as Coleman, but he's as explosive, and I think that he is a guy. He's the kind of guy you run a 7-yard hitch with, and you miss a tackle, it's a touchdown. I mean, he's a guy that's very explosive, and I don't really worry about having wide receivers under Jeff Levy. I think he'll always be able to kind of construct that, and Bumpus, I think, has done a good job in the portal the last couple of years. But I think when you look at this aspect of it, this offense itself kind of lends itself to pass catchers because you throw it as much as you do. And so I think that group is going to be as good as last year. Can somebody step up and be Coleman? Yeah, we'll see. You got a lot of candidates. But I don't think this team is going to have the big issue with scoring. I mean, again, you think about last year too, to kind of go to running back. Davin Booth really didn't know where he was running the first half of the year. And then by the second half of the year, he figures it out. Johnny Daniels, a nice piece for you, but he was having to carry probably a bigger share of the workload than you expected because, beginning of the year, you have to dismiss a running back, and that's Jeffrey Pittman, and so you go out and you add fluff to this mix, you still have Johnny Daniels back, and you get the gift of getting Devin Booth back because of this NCAA and ruling about junior college stuff. That running back room went from being a liability to being a strength. And so I think that's one of the things you kind of, again, a rejuvenated offensive line, a running back room that's going to be as good as probably the top half of the SEC. You get Blake Shapen back. I don't think you're going to have the problems offensively. Again, that's why I'm a little optimistic about getting to 5 or 6 wins, is because I think this team will be able to score, and I think this defense will be markedly better than last year. Again, don't expect them to be elite, but I think they'll be able to get some stops this year and get the offensive football back.
Don't you agree that they got to go 4-0 in the non-con?
Yeah, and we've talked about it before. I think that Arizona State game is the most important game on the schedule. And I know there's some people out there within the rivalry think, oh, no, it's always the Egg Bowl. Absolutely not. We've got to stop thinking that way. That's always a big game. But when you think about the totality of the season, if you can find a way to get that win over Arizona State, that puts you in a great position to go 4-0 in the non-conference. And I think you need all 4 of those to feel good about the possibility of making a bowl game. But that Arizona State game at home opener, night game, the LED lights will be unveiled for the first time. It should be an electric environment. And so there's a lot of reasons to show up that night. But if State can win that ball game, I think it really is a very positive step, not only just for the season, but for the program at large.
All right. So that's a night game against Arizona State?
Yeah, well, night games, as far as night games go in the South, I think let's kick off 7 o'clock, something like that. But, we'll get a chance to.
Okay.
We'll get a chance to have fun, but we need a capacity crowd. We certainly do.
I've got texters saying that this Mississippi State program and team, it can't sleep on Southern Miss at Southern Miss. Your thoughts?
I agree with that too. And Charles Huff is a guy, obviously, that that has some history with Mississippi State. He understands how important it would be for Southern Miss to beat Mississippi State. And, of course, I think he has, 20 players from Marshall that made the trip down to Hattiesburg with him. And, again, I don't know what Marshall was doing. It makes no sense to me that you would let a championship coach leave, for an in-conference program. But, yeah, we can't overlook that game. But, yeah, it's still a game I expect to win, as is Vegas. I think last time I looked, State was 13.5-point favorite. But, you can't go down there and lay an egg, But, from a talent standpoint, State ought to be able to compete and do a good job even in Hattiesburg. I know there's some paranoia out there because people understand how important the game is.
Sure.
You lose that ball, it's like, oh, my God.
It's curtains.
Again.
All right,
Yeah.
Steve, thank you, man. Steve Robertson, JeansPage.com, brought to you by Two Brothers and Older Brother Restaurants in Starkville.
See you, bud.